Okay, let's kick off. So yeah, big thank you for everyone. I know the weather and half term makes it difficult to attend these kind of things, but yes, it's really good to have you all on board. This is the 9th now. We're getting close to a year of AI and webinars. And the idea behind the webinar, as I've said many times before, is like taking a practical approach to how local SMEs here on the island can start using AI. Slightly different topic today, but yeah, we'll dive into that in a minute. So the title is AI without risk. So it's looking at data protection and responsible AI in Jersey, and we are joined by JOIC and Propel Forward, and I'll do the proper introductions in a moment. Just quickly, before we start, a little bit about Blue Llama and who we are. So we're all about AI productivity. So that's looking at businesses and removing that repetitive, often low value that your team does, so that they can be freed up to focus on sort of higher value, more human work. We've got 3 kind of delivery methods. We do discover. So that's where we go deep into your business to uncover and prioritize opportunities for AI and optimization, so that you can be more productive. Then we deliver on those solutions. So often our deliveries are around process automation, AI assistance, so allowing sort of custom co-pilots to empower your team to do things faster and better. And then AI assisted development, so building tools using AI so that it expedites that process and makes it cheaper to deliver really good tools for your business, custom tools that are integrated with all your software. Predominantly we use Microsoft Stack, and in particular we kind of use the Power Platform that some people might be familiar with. And then we've kind of introduced a new product, which is Delegate, which is being like your outsourced IT department. So as well as doing the delivery of projects, we also help with your roadmap. We can educate your staff, change management, a little bit of governance that we're talking about today. And it's kind of like handing over the responsibility of AI, because we know that there's a lot of pressure and anxiety around AI, and being able to hand that over to us is a nice thing. So look at it like a fractional CFO, but for AI. And in particular, we work best with sort of organizations around 25 to 100 employees, and we work with all sorts of different sectors, but the one where we're probably getting the most return on investment is professional services. Enough about Blue Llama. Let's dig into what our topic is today. So taking a different approach. So instead of the normal sort of presentation questions at the end, what we're doing is more of like a fireside chat, hence the nice beach. I didn't think it was good to have like a winter fireside photo, so we got a beach shot there. And yeah, we're doing it with a panel. So we have, well, I'll do the introduction later, but as I said, it's JOIC, the local regulator, and Propel Forward, who are a data protection consultancy. And yeah, so I'm going to be asking some questions, and then Anne and Paul are going to kind of answer those in a fireside manner. The questions, the topics are going to be where do we start in terms of data protection when we're looking at AI projects. We'll be looking at that kind of Microsoft assumption that, yeah, if we do stuff using Microsoft tools, Microsoft AI, then that's all nice and secure. Looking at the problem of shadow AI, so people within the organization may be using tools that that the organization hasn't rolled out themselves, and the implications of that. And then looking at Jersey's AI Playbook as well, and getting opinions on that. And then we should have about 20 minutes at the end to do questions. So if you do have questions, put them in the chat, and then we'll either answer them kind of in the middle, or we'll keep those to the end. And I should also say, because I know we've got the regulator on here, that we are recording this, and we will be putting out the recording on our website. So if you don't want to be included on that, then just drop us an email or something. Brilliant. Okay, so today's topic. So this word governance is kind of appearing a lot in conversations that we're having about AI. Now, it's quite a broad term because it includes things like ethics, risk frameworks, like who's accountable for AI, model evaluation, all these kind of things. But I would say that in 9 out of 10 conversations I'm having with local businesses, when they talk about governance, their main kind of problem that they have is around data protection. And the big question they're asking is, you know, if we use this, is our data going to be safe? So we all know that AI is really exciting. The return on investment is like real, and we're seeing it like day to day. But a lot of people view it as like AI being this kind of black box, and they're putting information in, something happens, and they get some information out, and they really want to understand, like, you know, what is going on in that black box. It's important to say here that JOIC that we have on the call are definitely not anti-AI, and Anne and Sammy have been big on communicating that message. They're actually sort of co-authors to the AI Playbook, and they've been involved in the creation of that. So yeah, they understand that Jersey needs to use AI and are happy with that happening, but they want to do it so that, you know, AI is integrated into your business in a way that data protection has been considered from the start. And that's kind of the thread of today's webinar. So just a quick introduction to our, calling it, experts. And Paul was saying earlier, like, it's important to know that that everyone here is not an expert on AI, but they are data protection. So just to put that across. So JOIC doesn't need an introduction, really. It's Jersey's data protection regulator. And Anne is an operations director. She oversees how JOIC works day to day. She's done in-depth data protection audits and training for organizations across Jersey. And before working, she was the lead of the Jersey Consumer Council, I believe. Sammy leads in operational compliance and policy at JOIC. She's been with the office for 8 years, and before that worked in compliance and data protection at BNP Paribas. She is recently become the board trustee at Enable Jersey. And then we have Paul. So Paul Bryan here from Propel Forward. Paul is the founder and CEO of Propel Forward. When I was kind of researching for this, I asked AI to tell me a little bit about Propel Forward, and it said it was Jersey's leading data protection consultancy. And I don't believe that's a hallucination, Paul. I think that's incredible. Paul is a Master of Laws in Information Rights, a published author of the book there. If you want to take a shot of that QR code, that'll take you to Amazon, where you can buy Paul's book, Navigating Data Protection. He's a committee member for the Animal Shelter, and before founding Propel Forward, Paul spent 22 years in the police force. Oh, no, we don't want to go there. So it's straight. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Paul has got, Paul and Annie and Sam have created some slides just to help the process. And then I'm going to stop sharing and just ask the first question that we have. So the first question is, like, where do we start? So let's say that I'm a managing director or an operations lead listening to this webinar right now, and my business is looking at starting a new AI project or rolling out some sort of new AI tool. There's going to be a lot of pressure to see productivity gains, but there's also concerns that I might have about data protection, as this is something kind of completely new to me rolling this out. What is the first thing that that person needs to do? And, you know, yeah, where do they start with things? So, Paul, I think you were going to take this one.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity of being here today. It's very exciting. Anne, did you want to just cover this first slide as to why the JOIC are here before we get in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul, for suggesting that. And thank you to Phil for inviting Sammy and myself here this afternoon. It's good to be here, but I thought it would just be useful to put into context why we're sitting on the webinar with you, because obviously I think Phil's actually done a very sterling job of introducing us, so thank you very much. But as a local regulator, obviously, we're looking through that lens of what every organisation is doing with personal information, which is why we're here sitting at the table with you today. We obviously want to make sure that Jersey is a good and safe place to do business, and that using AI doesn't become a barrier to that, but using AI responsibly is really important, because obviously AI, I would imagine in most use cases, by default involves personal information. And remember, personal information is quite a broad definition. It's not just the inevitable name and address we tend to associate with it. It includes a plethora of other things like videos, images, voice recordings, such as the recording on this today, is all personal data. So depending on how you're deploying AI, I suspect you're using it with personal information. So we want to be part of that landscape, helping you all to use it responsibly. Because whilst the law is very straightforward, it has the principles that you need to follow, and we're here to help. So please don't kind of think this is too much for us. We're a small business. We're very much about, we're here to help and help you get it right. Because obviously we don't want the consequences that we're going to get to at the end of the webinar. We really want to build up through the next sort of few minutes of discussing how you can get it right. So that's why we're at the table with you today. But thanks for that, Paul. I'll go back to you now.
Yeah, so, well, I'm here because Phil invited me. I'll have a chat. We work with a huge client base across all sectors, and we're seeing AI, obviously, as the main topic of conversation. And like Phil just said, it's great to hear that people wanting to deploy AI are thinking about data protection. So on to the first question about where we start. Well, I'm going to reel it right the way back to when I was involved in process improvement. You have to start on understanding why you want to use AI. Don't just get AI in your business just because a colleague you've met at chamber lunch or the IOD has started using an AI note taker, and you think, oh, I need to keep up with the Joneses. Do a use case. Understand why you want to use AI, understand what the AI is going to do for you and benefit from that, and do an audit on what's currently happening within your business. We are going to be talking later on about a term called shadow AI, which I won't go into now, but people more than likely will already be using AI in your business without you knowing. So do that audit, understand what's being used, and then understand why you want to use it. So starting point with any data protection, and AI by itself is not regulated in Jersey, like they have the EU AI Act across Europe. Data Protection Jersey Law 2017 regulates AI because in the majority, over 90% of cases I've seen, it involves personal data, as Anne just mentioned there, and personal data is quite broad. So understand what personal data is, understand what you want to use it for, and then move on from there. And then Anne will come in, I'm sure now. Anne, do you want to come in on DPIAs, on the legal requirement of DPIAs before?
We can do, we certainly can do, because I think we're mindful as well that, as you said, when you're using any new system, any new process, whether it's AI or not, you've always got to think about what's the thing I'm trying to fix? What do I want to get out of this? And I think you're right that you will need to think about, when we say a DPIA, but I don't want to scare everyone, it's basically figuring out kind of from the start to the end, what's happening with the personal information, how the system uses it. So it's just like a piece of risk management, if you like. You just work out what I'm putting in, what happens to it, where it goes, who's keeping it, who can see it, what gets spat out at the end in a very simple term. And under the terms of data protection, that's called a data protection impact assessment, which sounds rather formidable. But on our website, there's some easy guidance and some simple steps. But I think as well, we were going to talk about the risk of what happens if you've already started using AI, because I'm just very mindful that we're talking about an ideal world that if you haven't started, this is what you do. But if you're halfway out the starting blocks, you know, what we're thinking is maybe just have a stop. If you can pause the process, fab, but I'm very conscious that people in business don't want to start. We don't want to stop processing because obviously that has implications on profitability, but certainly do the same assessment. Stop, think about what's happening to the personal information, because it's got to be quality data that goes into it. So don't have data you don't need. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure that the people whose data it belongs to understands what you're doing with it. And so think about that as well. And if you need to, you can come and ask us for any advice as well, which I think is a really important part. But you do need to understand what you're doing. Anything that can mitigate the risks is what we're interested in as a regulator. If it's almost write out a shopping list of, this is what I'm worried about, how am I going to stop that happening? And this is what I don't think I can, but this is how I'm going to reduce the risk. We would expect you to have documented a fairly simplistic but thorough overview of of that, how you're going to cope with any problems. Do you want to add to that, Sammy?
Yeah, I think also staff training is really important on this as well. If you've rolled out any sort of AI platform and tools, making sure that your staff understand exactly how that tool works, what information is going out to it, into it, what's happening with that information while it's being processed and what's coming out. Obviously, considering the implications for the people whose personal data is being processed, particularly as well. Obviously, that covers for your employees as well. If you have any staff and you're using AI on their data as well, thinking about any sort of outcomes and implications that there may be for those individuals. And thinking about maybe if you haven't already reviewed some of those settings on those platforms and consider putting in kind of role-based access as well, if you haven't already.
Yeah, I think you raised a very good point there about DPIAs, and I don't necessarily agree that it's a simplistic document. It has to be detailed, it has to be defensible. If something does go wrong, and touch wood it doesn't, your DPIA is your rationale around using it. If you make it too simple and you make it too short, it's not really a defensible document if something goes wrong. So compliance, as we know, is all about that. And always think with data protection, you've got an accountability principle. And part of that accountability is by design and by default. Get your DPO or your data protection lead or whoever in the room talking about. Don't just slap it on your DPO's desk and say, we've already got a subscription for this. We've thought about it. We've done our use case. And that's the first time you get your data protection person involved in it. Get them in the room early, is what I say. But I mean, the data protection law is not an obstruction to innovation. It's not an obstruction to people using technology. It's there to help. And I always say that to our clients, don't be afraid of data protection, but get it right first time out.
Yeah, I think I wasn't implying that it can be to be totally simple, but I don't want to deter anyone from at least stopping and unraveling what they're doing.
No.
And so we've got templates that can help somebody, because obviously these are ranging in different complexities of what an AI tool will do. Something might be quite simple and straightforward, and somebody's processing very kind of not hugely risk focused. If you've got, say you're funneling through health data through an AI model, clearly the risk of that is far greater than if you're putting in somebody's name. So this is what I'm saying. There's got to be proportionate. Proportionality is a big thing for us. We would, of course, you've got to be able to document it, but I'd rather you did a simple document than nothing at all and buried your head and thought, well, the regulator won't be interested. We would rather support you through it. Even if you're worried, come and talk to us and we'll navigate you through it. So I think that's the main message here, is that we're here to help. We're not here as a hindrance, but we want to protect, because at the end of the day, all this data might be your family and my family as well. So we want to make sure it's safe and used responsibly. So yeah, very happy to work with any organisation that wants a bit more guidance on a DPIA.
Perfect. I've just shared in the chat there. You've got a DPIA template, haven't you, on the website? So
yeah.
In the chat that people.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. That's a good idea.
Yeah, no problems. And I suppose it brings us to the question. So DPIAs, they can be quite complex if you're using tools that you found on the internet and you don't understand where they're sending their data. They may be based, their servers may be based in America or outside the EU, and so there can be lots of problems. But one of the assumptions that businesses make, and I've got to confess, we kind of make as well a little bit, is when you're using, and it's kind of why we've moved from using other tools to predominantly using Microsoft and the Power Platform, as I was talking about before, is that the AI, in our understanding, sits in your own tenant there, and then the data should essentially be quite safe when you're sharing your data, as if you're kind of storing it in SharePoint or storing it in an Excel document. My understanding is that information stays within the tenant. But I think this one's for you guys. Is that true in practice, and what are businesses missing if they're making that assumption? Annie, Sam. Well,
either will do. We don't mind.
So I think it's really important to note on that one that yes, it is definitely assumption based to some extent. And the most important thing we would say, not specifically just with Microsoft and Copilot, is that you go back to the basic data protection principles and data protection by design and default, whereby you are considering any tool that you're using and undertaking a level of due diligence on that vendor and that platform that you're considering using, and going through thinking about data protection right from the very start, making sure your data protection officer or data protection lead is involved in choosing that platform, and understanding what that model or platform that you've chosen is going to be doing with that data. Is it going to be exactly hosted within your tenant? Have you considered the different types of licenses that you can purchase and what that means about where the data is going to be stored and how it's going to be used? Will it be used to train like the original model, or will it only be used to train within your own data set, for example? But I think going back to basics here is just making sure that you go back to the data protection principles, think about, have you got a lawful basis for putting that data in any platform, not just Microsoft Copilot in the first place? Should you be sort of restricting access to different areas and what data is being used, making sure that it's minimal data and only necessary for the purpose for which you need it. So for example, don't just open up your Microsoft Copilot license or whatever platform you're using to your entire database if that's not necessary for the purpose that you're trying to achieve. Making sure that you've got the right security protocols around that as well. Think about how long the data is going to be retained within the model as well, and how it's going to be used. Is there any onward sharing, for example? How's it coming out of the platform? So I think those are all the really important things to do, and that doesn't just apply for Microsoft Copilot. That's for any tool that anybody's going to be using. Just take it back to basics and refer back to the principles, because as Paul said, we don't have a specific AI law in Jersey, but it's just going back to the data protection basics and applying those in any tool that you choose to use.
Yes, be under no illusion just because you've used AI and put personal information in it, that the data protection Jersey law doesn't apply. It still applies, and you are still responsible for that personal information as what's termed the data controller under the law. So yeah,
and I think we're not picking on Copilot. I don't want people to think we are, but that is the most prevalent sort of system that's being handed out at the moment. But this also goes for Gemini Workspace. If you use Google, goes for any enterprise AI tool that sits on top of your existing document estate, and we'll use it like that. I've heard from a lot of it's Copilot, it's completely safe, it's within our tenant, it's the same as SharePoint, it automatically pops up when it's there to help. And you're right to a degree. The risk using Copilot is a lot lower in your tenant than it is using ChatGPT, for example, sitting outside your tenant. So we're not here to say that you can't use it, but what you've got to remember, and if you take it back to the beginning, before you started thinking about using Copilot, you weren't particularly worried about your infrastructure, about your file database, how it was structured, who was given permission to have access to a restricted folder, and whether you've actually ever gone back and de-restricted a folder or removed people's permissions. So you have to look at your infrastructure, how your database is set up, what data you have in there. Because as soon as you plug an enterprise AI tool like Copilot or Gemini into your system, it's going to trawl out files. It's going to do exactly what it's been asked to do. Yeah. And if you haven't got your file structure locked down properly, as an example, a member of your staff could put in a simple thing, tell me the salary structure within this organization, and it's going to go and do what it's been asked. And if those files haven't been cleansed, if they haven't been restricted correctly, it's going to give that person your salary structure. So that's the first thing I say. Don't just think Copilot is safe. Yeah, you have to think about what your data set looks like. All right. Use sensitivity labeling. Now, Copilot works with labeling, basically. So if you put something as restricted, it's not going to drag it out in the public or within the workforce database. Have a look at that. And we're not going to repeat ourselves. I think we covered DPIAs. you have to do a DPIA. The law says if any change of processing activity takes place, or if there's a high risk to the data that's being processed, you must do a DPIA. By using Copilot, you're changing a data processing activity. You may start using automated decision making within that. You don't know that. We're not going to drag up what we just said about DPIAs, but have a look at that from a base level. So my short answer to it is Copilot inside your tenant. It's safer than ChatGPT outside, but it's absolutely not the same as SharePoint. You have to treat it like any other AI tool. Cleanse your database. There are tools you can get to cleanse your database. Make sure that you haven't got 16 versions of an employee contract, because Copilot won't know what version to pull out. It will guess. So have a clean database. And I'm sure organizations like Blue Llama will help you to do that from a cleansing perspective before they plug in AI. The JOIC have said they are available for guidance, and they are very approachable. We're lucky in Jersey. We live in a small jurisdiction. You can ring up the JOIC and ask a question. They will answer it as best they can. They're not a consultancy service, but they will answer it as best they can with guidance. They do templates. If you also want help with this stuff, we're available. But I'm not here to sell my business. I'm here to explain what AI is from a practical level. That's my view on that.
Perfect. No, thanks very much, Paul. So what I'm hearing there is adding Copilot into your existing infrastructure is fine in terms of it's within your tenant, but you've got to think about was the existing infrastructure set up in the right way. So are the roles and the privileges and all that kind of stuff, are they correct? And yeah, because AI will be able to identify those little flaws and could wreak havoc. Yeah, because it empowers the people to do more, the users to do more, and then they can find information that maybe they shouldn't.
If you have a good data protection regime within your business anyway, you would have already thought about data minimization. You would have already thought about data accuracy. So you'd already be most of the way there if you have a structure in place already.
Sure. Okay. And that kind of brings us on, I suppose, to the idea of shadow AI. So yeah, Copilot might be rolled out within your organization and you've got policies around that and everything. But there's possibility that members of your team are using these other tools that aren't rolled out officially. Things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and just other tools that they can find on the internet. Sometimes even some of those might be pasting in customer data, contracts, internal documents, which they shouldn't do. From a regulatory and practical standpoint, what should businesses be doing to sort of prevent that and act on that if people are using it in the wrong way?
So I think shadow AI is a huge risk these days, particularly because of how accessible and easy it is to find tools for staff themselves, just to be doing it on the side of their desk, for example, or using personal devices. So it's really important that organizations think about what sort of governance and housekeeping they have around shadow AI, and obviously that will come in the form of policies and procedures and making sure that staff are trained appropriately so they know what is and isn't appropriate. And hopefully it's communicated to staff that it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to get a client list and put it in your personal chat GPT just to ask it to do something with the data or whatever that might be. So it's really important that you have the right policies and procedures in place that are understandable and that staff are aware of them. It's no good having a procedure manual that doesn't make sense or is too lengthy and nobody's actually read it. It's about making sure that people have read and understood what's there. But also I think a huge part of this is making sure that your organization has developed sort of an open culture where people can be honest about the fact that maybe they've been partaking in some shadow AI and maybe they just haven't realized that they're doing that. I think a lot of the time there's always good intention with these things. Nobody's done it, well, most of the time people haven't done it with negligence or any sort of malicious intent. People have just done it because they thought it was helpful to improve their productivity or efficiency or whatever that might be, but maybe not thinking about the implications. And that's where we like to say that obviously thinking about data protection and everything you do is really important when you're handling personal data. And obviously one of the things you can do is having sort of controls in place. So say, for example, if your policy is that you don't allow ChatGPT to be used on any of your client data, for example, then you might want to put a technical block in place to prevent people being able to do that. Obviously, you've got an element of trust with your staff and anybody who's using any of those sorts of tools, but you can put in technical controls in place as well. But just think about as well, the risk there, the huge risk there is data leakage. You don't know what data may have then left your organization if staff are partaking in shadow AI and using tools on the side of their desk without realizing, and you've had a whole load of data leave your organization without realizing.
And what if that does happen, Sammy? What's the is that considered a breach by JOIC's standards?
Yeah, so I mean, if there's any sort of personal data that's essentially left your organization, then yes, that would very likely constitute a personal data breach. And we can go into a bit more detail. I'll let Paul carry on with his bit first, and then we can go into kind of what would happen in that situation, and what our expectations would be if that was the case.
Sure. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it's shadow AI, as Sammy rightly said, so it is a huge risk for organizations. And we're not talking about from the ground up. In a lot of cases I'm seeing it's from the top. So you start with your board. Your board are getting board packs sent to them. They're possibly using some form of AI to summarize those board packs without your notification. There is personal data contained within a board pack. And then coming down to directors and the business leaders, managers, they're trying to make their job more efficient, speed up their job. They're putting performance reviews in through AI just to word it better or just to check it. But that's identifiable data. It doesn't have to have somebody's name on it to be personal data. It can be identifiable. So you have to look at it from all areas. So what I say, or what we advise, is to do an audit as to where you are. Don't come in heavy-handed, because as soon as you go in heavy-handed, you create a culture of underground activity. You want, as Sammy said, you want a culture of learning, of transparency, of trust. So do an audit as to where you are, and don't just send a survey in. People don't answer surveys. Go and talk to your staff. Ask them, are you using AI to make your job more efficient? Because we're trying to establish tools that we can use. So if you found some that are good, let me know and have that conversation. Once you have your list, put in a sanctions list. Make it clear to your staff with your policy, as Stan rightly pointed out. These are the tools we have chosen within our organization to use. Make sure they're not free accounts. Don't go on free, go on enterprise accounts where you can actually tell the tool, I'm not allowing this to be used to train the foundational database. Yeah, and then once you build that sanction list, you can then put in a policy around the use of AI within your business. The questions that you asked about a data breach, and this is where data protection and AI governance comes like this, and it blends. If somebody puts somebody's data into a shadow AI platform, like a performance review, let's stick with that. JOIC's 3-year plan is one of their pillars is AI, and they are going to be starting on an audit on how it's being used within the HR environment. Yeah, and help that sort of sector with that cause, because employee data is high risk data. It's actually named as high risk within the EU AI Act. So have a look at how that's been transmitted through. If somebody puts that on, it is almost certainly, yes, a data breach, which Sammy will go into from a regulatory perspective, or on how the JOIC picked that up. But you have 72 hours once you become aware of that in order to report to the JOIC. And that's a legal requirement. Over to the jail.
Yeah, I think we're going to do this one together, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, from our point of view, you're quite right that there is a threshold of reporting to us if the breach hits that likely to impact on the rights and freedoms of the individual. Not every breach has to be reported to us. Again, there is guidance on our website, but if in doubt, report it. But I think let's backpedal just slightly first. I think once you become aware of a breach, I think the important thing is to stop, try and prevent the breach occurring or reoccurring or carrying on. Certainly press pause, understand what's going on. You should have your own internal breach log as well. It's very important that you're mapping out when the breach happened, what the cause of it, what mitigation you put in place, because you should be checking and seeing if there's patterns happening within your own organization, because you might see that there's a flaw or weakness in a system or something, or Mavis in accounts keeps sending the wrong email. Clearly we need to get some more training. And I think depending on the cause of something, you might be involved with the Jersey Cybersecurity Centre as well, depending on what's going on if there's a particular platform. But I think the key is, if you're not sure whether you report it to us once you've established you have a breach, even if you've only got fairly schematic information at this point, still contact us. There's a form on the website. You can always add to that information as you gather more data as the breach. Hopefully you understand more about it, but you've stopped it. But the main thing is, do not panic, don't ignore it, but learn from it. I'm not sure if anyone wants to add to that, Sammy or Paul.
I think you're absolutely right, and avoid the rush to report. So as Anne says, pause, take a step back, and avoid that rush to report, because the law says what you have to do first is you've got to establish if a data breach has actually taken place. So a data breach is only reportable if it has caused a risk to the rights and freedoms of the individual. If it hasn't caused a risk, it's an internal data incident. Yeah, so that's the terminology we use to try separate. So always think of it as a data incident before you escalate it to a reportable data breach. As soon as it's reportable and you establish it and you become aware that it's a breach, it doesn't matter if the file was uploaded last week. It's when the data controller becomes aware that it's a data breach, you have that 72-hour window. And again, don't rush to put the notification into the JOIC. Try contain it, stop it, understand what happened, understand what data is involved in it, and do your initial report. Your 72 hours isn't to do a final report. I've had some data breaches that have run on for 9 months with the JOIC, because we've been finding more information, we've been telling the enforcement officer, we've been finding more, we've been telling them, and it's taken a long time to actually establish what's happened. So don't panic, take your foot off the gas, look at it with fresh eyes, understand if it's a data breach, and then just do that report with the JOIC. As soon as you do the report with the JOIC, you're not suddenly going to have a load of people turning up with still yellow jackets with JOIC written on the back and banging your door down. They're there to guide and help you. But they are also regulators. If you go wrong, they're going to tell you where you went wrong, and they're going to tell you how to establish a correct course of action. But they will also say, nah, we don't agree that this is reportable. We're going to keep it on file. It's closed off. Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah, and I think, can I add to that, Paul? I think you did a very good point there. And we always say it's not if you have a breach, it's when. And this isn't just relating to AI per se. I know this is an AI webinar, but this could happen in any kind of activity at work. That have a plan what you're going to do. Have a plan about what you do if there is a breach. Because as we always sort of laughingly say, it's probably going to happen on Boxing Day afternoon when you suddenly become aware, and certain directors are off sunning themselves the other side of the world. Or so it's just have a plan in place so you know what to do, who to contact, who is contactable, know this. So, and I think that's one of the tried and tested things I would urge people to have. Preparation is key. And I think we've mentioned the principles of the law quite early on today. And if you think, the principles will basically cover the life cycle of data. So think about where you've got it from, how long you're keeping it, are you keeping it accurate? Paul always likes me to talk about data minimization when I'm with him. So I think if you follow the principles of the law, it will help you should you have a breach, because you know and understand and have a better feeling of the landscape as well. So I think do some housekeeping. Prevention is much better from our point of view than cure, but we understand things will go wrong. Yeah, mostly we will, if you report it to us, we will help you go through that really emotional period, because it can be very high emotion when you're trying to report a breach to us, depending on what's happened. Mostly they're low level from our point of view, but sometimes they're not. And off the back of a breach, we can launch enforcement action. I would flag that. We're not all cuddly all the way through, but we do try and work hard with people to help navigate them to a better outcome.
Yeah, and remember, a data breach is not something that's just written in law. It's not just words. It's a person. It's a person's information. So always think about that. The law requires you to notify the individual if you establish a high risk. Transparency is one of the first principles of data protection. And I always feel, and we will always advise clients, involve the data subject. You don't have to go, oh, the law says we don't have to. It's good practice, isn't it? Just let the data subject know. And then the data subject can tell you if they feel at risk or not, or how they feel about it, because it's a very subjective view, risk. I could consider my name and phone number being put out as a risk, but or somebody's name and phone number being put out as a risk. But when I actually speak to that person, they go, "Oh, listen, it's not an issue. Thanks for letting me know." They could get it anyway on Google, so don't bother about it. I'm happy with you dealing with it in-house. So it's involving people.
Well, I'm just going to jump in because we are a little bit behind time. Are the JOIC high-vis jackets available on the website to buy? Or
yeah, we're thinking about that, Phil, actually. We'd like to kind of be measured up for size, but yes.
Same link as my book.
Yeah, so quite quickly, and if just to everyone who's attending, if you have got questions, do put them in the chat so that we can have a look at those before. But just one last question from us, completely different to what we talked about before, but the AI Playbook for Jersey was released, I think, at the end of February, and it's like it's kind of to encourage best practice, I think, in using AI, and encourage people, especially the finance industry, businesses locally, to start thinking about AI. From your perspectives, what's it doing well, and what are the gaps that businesses still need to think about themselves? Anne and Sammy.
Yeah, I think we have to remember that the AI Playbook, it's a foundation book, if you like. And I likened yesterday, and we were preparing for this, and Sammy looked at me blankly. I said, it's not a Haynes manual, it's the highway code. And those of you on the call who are more my generation, you'll know what Haynes manual is versus a YouTube video on how to fix your car. This is the highway code. It's talking about that kind of that foundation. It sets out 7 guiding principles and 5 strategic objectives. And this is about a collaboration piece between us as a regulator. You've got Digital Jersey in there, you've got government, Jersey Cyber Security Centre. So it's the first, I think, of a showing we can collaborate to make sure we're agile as an island so that we can adopt AI sensibly. So I think this is the beginning. I'm not sure it's come up with any solutions yet, if that's what you're asking me, Phil, but it's certainly about championing ethical AI, improving the regulation around it, strengthening governance and building workforce skills. So we're part of that landscape, but we're not the only contributor to that landscape. But that's why I think as an island, we can work so well together. Size is our advantage here.
Yeah, I think you're right in saying, Phil, that it's predominantly for the finance industry or sector. It's not a how-to guide. It is, as Anne says, it's the highway code. It gives you the principles, it lets you go the way you want to go. There are gaps in it from a practical standpoint, because it really doesn't give you the answers. It suggests, it mentions data protection by design, but it doesn't explain how to do that. It aligns, it gives us a shared vocabulary. It aligns Jersey with the direction of travel from an international standpoint, but it is a foundation. It's not the finish line. It's where we go. you still have to think about reading the AI Playbook, which is a great start for Jersey. It gives somebody to go to, gets us on a common path, but you still have to think about the data protection principles. I mentioned the acronym again, DPIAs. You still have to think about DPIAs. It doesn't tell you how to do that. It doesn't tell you how to train your staff. It mentions you should train your staff, or you do train your staff, but it doesn't tell you how to actually go about that. But it is treated as a playbook. I've got that written down here, which I really like. It's the floor, it's not the ceiling. So think of it as that. You've got to put in the rest of the stuff above it to anchor it into what you do. But it's a good start.
Perfect. Did you have anything more on that? Anyone?
No.
Oh, no. Perfect. So we haven't got any questions as yet in the chat. So if anyone does want to ask some questions, either for JOIC or for Paul, then do please put some questions in. I do have another one in reserve if we need it. Yeah, just quickly before we do dive into questions, I just wanted to talk about. Am I sharing my screen? Yeah, there we go. Just wanted to talk about next month's webinar. So it's on Thursday, the 25th of June, and this one's quite different to today. It's all about marketing automation. So we've got Nathan Nichols, who's just founded a new company called Ikigai, and he's going to be talking about building marketing systems using AI that don't just chuck out slop, but have like you feed them with all the information that you need for it to output really good, consistent marketing content. So stuff that you can use in your blogs or your website. So it should be a really good one if you're involved in marketing. So there's the QR code there and a link to it. Also, Ivana's just, well done, Ivana, has just put a link in the chat. So yeah, if you want to attend that one, then please do. Any questions from anyone, or if you feel like you want to come up on and actually speak, then please do just raise your hand, and we can take some questions, or put them in the chat. The little chat icon is down on the bottom right here in Google. So it's that little speech bubble. No question. Oh, do we have? Elizabeth. Thank you. Yeah, what would you like to ask?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much. It's been very informative. I'm just thinking in terms of, healthcare. So with the new AI clinical tools that are going to be coming online with decision support systems, what governance standards does JOIC expect us to be adhering to the UK standards or the European, a combination? Because they are a little bit different. So it's just trying to get a better guidance in terms of the governance around.
When you say governance standards, because obviously in terms of data protection, that's my guardrails and mandate. We're focused on the data protection Jersey law that came in 2018. Now, I suspect within the health remit, you've got your own standards and guidance as well. And because I'm not quite sure the relationship you have with the UK and how the health data works, but that's something that your own DPO will have done a lot of work on within health to make sure that if you're moving data, transferring it, using it, whatever, that you're going to be complying with the relevant standards, the relevant legislation and frameworks. And I suspect that you'll have had I hope to think you've had a DPIA undertaken for any changes like that as well, because that is exactly when you've got special category data of the highest sensitivity, and we can't overlook, of course, we're a small jurisdiction, so immediately I suspect that within 2 steps we would know somebody about if we saw their data, so that places extra burden of responsibility. But from our perspective, we're worried about the local legislation, but of course from your role, that's where you have to work out as the controller what else you need to comply with as well to make sure that your operation is undertaken responsibly and compliantly.
Yeah, if I may, Doctor, it's nice to see you, and great the work you're doing championing AI within the health sector. I think it's the way forward. Ireland are doing marvellous work in relation to use of AI around diagnostic tools. They're using it for their bowel cancer screening, and it is speeding up. I've been at a number of conferences where doctors from the Irish Health Board have spoken about it. I think guidance, I mean, Anne is absolutely right. Jersey just relies upon the data protection Jersey law and the principles therein. But I think you have to look further to Caldecott principles. You've got to include them. I think if you also looked at the EU AI Act, that covers quite a lot of requirements around the use of health data. And that's where the Irish Medical Board are centering their governance structure upon. But I also think the NHS, the DP toolkit, they've included now an AI requirement for their governance standard. And any health organizations that we're working with, we try and bring them up to those standards. So it's going to comply with the Jersey law, but you also have the additional codes of practices, the additional assessments that the AI, the data protection toolkit for the NHS adhere to. So I think if you aim your pitch at there, it's going to be a much higher standard, and it brings in different ethical approaches that the data protection Jersey law wouldn't necessarily cover in its entirety.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting there, Paul, we've jumped around jurisdictions to always think about where the data is going. We've spoken about Europe, we've spoken about Ireland, and we think those jurisdictions are deemed fairly safe for us. But if you've got, and this isn't necessarily just to do with the answer to the question, but depending on the platform you're using or whatever, your data could well be funneling off to China or America. So that's another key consideration for us as a regulator, that we would expect you to know where it's being hosted, who has access to it, and the research you've undertaken on that platform or AI as well, because obviously it becomes more complicated, and I understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you'll agree. You look at Article 19, your requirement around data processor agreements. That's where you legally have to do your due diligence, and that's where you find out all of that. So if you do your due diligence around it, just because they are data processors, they're not joint controllers. They're not controllers in their own right. In most cases, treat them as you would somebody who's doing IT support like Phil. You do your due diligence, you put in place your data processor agreement, you do your DPIA, and then if you adhere to those higher standards. Sorry, it's a bit longer question, but it's a very technical area, Doctor.
Good question, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Anyone else with questions? I've got one in my back pocket. But yeah, maybe not the best question to end with, but I suppose it's around consequences. So if a business does get this wrong, and customer data ends up on somewhere that it shouldn't have, through using AI and whichever tool, what does that look like? And what are the real consequences that a business might end up incurring? Are the high-vis jackets going to come out?
Potentially, they might actually come out on that one, Phil. But I think what we always pare back, and I think this is Paul's mentioned this a bit earlier, that we can talk very generically about this, but this is about our family and friends' information. So any real issues could have a huge impact on people. It could be a breach or a problem, one person's information, but hugely life-changing, thousands of pieces of data, but not really an impact. If you recall years ago in Ireland when the policemen's names and addresses and data were leaked, you had people then had to move house, relocate, protection schemes. So whilst we can say it might not have an impact, it can. So I think always remember that there's people at the end of this. And I think going back to your earlier question, if you don't report a breach to us, remember the person whose data has been breached may report it into us as well. So we then think very lowly if you fail to tell us, but your clients are telling us. So that's number one. So we may come and knock on your door, not physically at this point, it might be more a phone call or an email, and we may carry out an investigation potentially, yes, and there could be sanctions. So the worst case is we could have a fine. We're more likely to give you some orders on how to get things straight, housekeeping in order. We could do a public statement, and often the naming and shaming is more detrimental than anything else. So I would urge you to think about that. But I think bearing in mind, let's backpedal, always think about this could be my information, walk in the shoes of the individual, make decisions based around that, and just don't do shortcuts. Shortcuts are very bad. It means that you could end up with problems. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add, Sammy.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's just about thinking about the person behind this. Ultimately, data protection is about people protection, and we want to think about the risk of harm to the individual. As Anne said, depending on the data that's being compromised, obviously the risk of harm to the individual will vary. It could result in kind of emotional stress or physical harm. Obviously think about other things, particularly with AI, in terms of any sort of bias and prejudice that might be built into an AI platform and how that might impact on an individual if that data was misused or disclosed inappropriately. And also sometimes the misinformation and hallucinations that can be generated when using AI and the impact that it might have on a person if that was to occur.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back a little bit, and I agree with everything, obviously, that Anne and Sammy have said, but I wouldn't put regulatory action at the top of the tree. That's the last thing as a business owner I would be thinking about. We live in a small island. If one of my team use an AI platform as Shadow.ai, which we've already covered, and upload my entire client database, I'm initially going to consider, obviously, the data breach, because legally we have to. But if we were going to put it on a priority tree as worry, what's going to keep me awake at night as a business owner is my reputation as a business. We live in a small island. Reputation is massive. That could lead to contractual loss, could lead to the next contract. Somebody's going to remember what you've done. You're always remembered for your last job on a small island. So I think reputation is my key priority. Obviously, we have to think about the data subjects that are involved. I'll put that on the regulatory tree, because obviously we've spoken about transparency. Operational and contract terms are actually support. People do due diligence on us as we become data processors. The more questions we're seeing about due diligence around how we use AI, so we have to be transparent about it. If we then do something that's outside of what we told them, our reputation could be shot. So I put regulatory action third on my worry list. What keeps me awake at night is my business reputation. And if you get everything 90% right, because you're never going to get 100%, you get everything 90% right in your structure, you can sleep a little bit better at night as a business owner. The yellow jackets are third on my list. And they're pretty nice yellow jackets. They don't actually have yellow jackets. I do apologize.
We're going to have to wrap things up, but we've just got one very quick question. I think maybe for you, Paul, in this one, from Manuel. Has anyone checked the T's and C's of the AI suppliers read data processing? Do they cover their obligations as we would expect as data controllers?
Good question. And I'm very sad. I read privacy notices, and it's not a policy. It's a gripe. Policy is an internal document, a notice is an external document. So it's always a privacy notice, in my view. There you go, simple opinion. I read privacy notice, I read T's and C's. It's the old story, isn't it? About, I think it was 2016, 2017, Apple put in the middle of their T's and C's that if somebody phoned a particular number, they get $1 million. Nobody ever rang it because nobody reads this stuff. But you need to know where these people are, because people use sub-processors. So if you use an AI recording tool and you think they're your processors, you have to ask what sub-processors. They might be using another AI tool as part of their data set in China. Yeah, in Brazil, we found a contact form on a website. We'd done due diligence on it, very simple thing, but it was diverting the data to a sub-processor in Brazil. So you have to think of these things. I don't know what Anne and Sammy's opinion is on that. I'm sure.
I think fundamentally the responsibility sits with you as the business owner, as the data controller in our term, and so you need to take whatever action or accountability for the information you're using. So if that means reading terms and conditions, reading privacy notices, absolutely, because And sometimes you've got to dig quite deep. Even we found out we've brought in a new HR platform. And what kind of, you've got to read between the surface to find out actually what's happening. So we've had to work quite hard at that, because often it's kind of embedded further down, just that they might have an engineer who's based in Bolivia or something. So you do have to work hard, and we appreciate it's not easy, but the data is your responsibility. So yeah, you've got to do all your relevant due diligence as you would in KYC. It's the same principle.
Yeah.
There's no escaping it, I'm sorry.
Good question. And you can always hire a firm like us to read your notices. We're highly skilled at doing that.
Lovely segue, Paul. Loved it.
I think on that note, we're over time. So I'd just like to say thank you very much, Anne, Sammy and Paul. Absolutely brilliant having you on. Some really good answers to the questions, and yeah, a big thank you. And thank you for everyone for attending. And yes, we'll absolutely see you in a month's time when we talk about marketing systems. So thanks very much. Have a lovely afternoon, and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.